Hey everyone. I just wanted to make a super kind of quick video to welcome you to Stat 113. As you probably know, the first week of class is entirely online, and so we'll do most of the kind of syllabusy type stuff when we meet in person next week. But I did want to send out a video just to kind of welcome you and to go through kind of a quick, cool example. And so you can see on the screen, I've listed my office hours, my name, where my office is, though that's kind of irrelevant for this quarter, and my email. So if you have any questions, definitely shoot me an email. I also did want to mention that our textbook that we'll be using is free, and so that is in the syllabus, and you could pay for a hard copy if you want, or you could download a free PDF. So in terms of what you'll need for this class, it's really just like a printer, definitely internet and a computer, and then a calculator of really any type is totally fine. It doesn't have to be like a fancy one or anything like that. Okay, so I'm gonna skip over this. Here's a cute little meme of SpongeBob. Class is gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome. Other than that, we'll talk about some of that stuff next week. And we're just going to kind of jump to a kind of cool example just to kind of give you an idea of like some of the types of studies that we'll be able to look at throughout the semester. And so in this example, we want to answer this question, is race associated with whether or not an applicant receives a callback for an interview? And we want to know the same type of thing for gender. And so these questions, especially now, are more important than ever. And so we want to see if we can use statistics to kind of answer some of these social justice related questions. And so an actual study on this was done. This was actually years ago. But what the study did was send out different fake resumes to some employers. Each of the resumes that were completely fake was randomly assigned a name, and each name was associated with a particular gender and a particular race. And so this next slide shows the names that the researchers used. Of course, I did want to mention that this does not mean that, for example, all people named Anne are white and female. This is just a typical association study, and the authors did a completely separate study to kind of back up this choice of name. So again, it of course doesn't mean that all people named Jay are white males. It just is an association that the authors kind of showed in a previous study so that they were able to get these names matched to races and genders. And of course, the other thing I wanted to mention is that when I say gender, we do recognize that there are more than two genders, but for the purposes of the study, the authors treated gender just as binary, so either female or male. They weren't interested in this study about any sort of relationships to non-binary genders. Okay, so it's kind of a cool study. We've got this results graph where the y-axis here is the proportion of times that a callback was actually received. And the x-axis is our different race-gender combinations. And so we see that black females received a callback, it looks like about 0.07 or 7% of the time. Black males, it looks like about 6%. White females got a callback about 10%, and people with the names associated being white males received a callback about 9%. So the questions that I want you to kind of take a minute to think about. I'm going to see if I could pull these onto the same page. Is based on the study, do you think that that is enough evidence to say that there was racial discrimination? Based on the study, do you think that this is enough evidence that there's gender discrimination? Which groups have lower callback proportions? And then finally, is there anything else that you'd like to know about the data or about how the data was collected to answer any of these first three questions? And so I'll give you a minute to go ahead and pause this video if you want to kind of think about any of these a little bit more. But I'm not going to pause because that would be very awkward. And I'll just give kind of some of the things that I thought about. So in answering these discrimination questions, perhaps some of the groups just happen to receive a higher proportion of callback just by random chance. So just by pure chance, white females happen to receive the most amount of callbacks. Another question I kind of thought of was, well, what if some names appeared more on resumes that generally had worse characteristics? So what if some names appeared a lot more on resumes with little experience, even though they were randomly assigned? How would we account for that differing resume experience? And so that's another kind of thing that we might want to know about the study. And then finally, I think the coolest / most important thing that we'll get to maybe about week 7 or 8 or so is how would we actually analyze these results statistically to convince someone that maybe there actually was racial discrimination. And so if we look at the results, there's not a ton of difference between genders if we look between the two races. But we do see that if we kind of compare across the races, we do see some differences there. And so what we want to be able to do is not only present this nice graph, which we'll also talk more about later in the semester. We want to be able to understand how this data was collected and why that's important in the conclusions that we could make, as well as be able to do a formal statistical analysis to see if there's actually evidence of racial discrimination from the study, or if it's reasonable to think that the proportion of callbacks is higher for one of the races just due to random chance. And so that's really an idea that we'll come back to quite a lot, especially later in the semester. So that's kind of our first introductory example. If you have any questions about this or really anything else throughout the semester, definitely feel free to email me. I'm super excited to get started, and I'm glad to have you in Stat 113 this semester. And so I'm looking forward to meeting all of you next week, and have a great rest of your day.